This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. A man murders his baby son and leaves him in a cupboard for his grandmother to find. A man who killed with a Lamborghini is jailed. And what 14 young boys did to a young girl will leave you speechless. But firstly, our headline story, and it is a tale on an epic scale and shows how much money is involved in crime within the region. 2 men have been convicted of laundering a staggering $3 billion and have now been deported to Cambodia. The 2 men were convicted in Singapore, and it is the largest money laundering case ever discovered within the country. A Mr. Su, a Chinese national who was holding a Cambodian passport, had $6 million in cash confiscated. His colleague, Mr. Wang, another Chinese national, was in possession of $2 million in cash and $8 million in property. Singapore news outlet CNA reported that the men were among a group of foreigners arrested for involvement in laundering a staggering $3 billion. Now, it's not much of a leap of the imagination to find that the probability for this vast mountain of cash is that it was made from the sale of illegal drugs. The sting operation involved more than 400 police officers, and they shut down the largest money laundering operation ever discovered by Singaporean authorities. The executive director of the People's Centre for Development here in Cambodia told us at the Khmer Times that this case creates a very bad image for Cambodia. And the officials who allowed these foreigners to have Cambodian passports should be investigated. He added, "The government shall investigate and punish any officials, especially those with the authority of issuing passports, to criminals involved in money laundering." He also added, "I believe corruption is still a factor that is allowing this to happen." This is a very sobering case. The billions of dollars involved show very clearly how big criminal gangs are within the region. Also, how far their deadly empire extends, bringing untold misery to so many victims. In this week's Crime Desk, we have updates on stories previously covered, including the Lamborghini driver who killed an innocent motorist, the military man who went on a shooting rampage, and a child murder so foul it is almost beyond comprehension. In a horrific crime that is almost beyond imagination, this week a father was jailed for 30 years. Under the influence of drugs, a man strangled his 2-year-old child to death. According to a police report, the man and his wife are both scavengers, and they are also both addicts. On the day of the murder, his wife left the house at 9 a.m. and with her cart, she went out to collect discarded objects from the streets, leaving her son at home with the father. Later, that same day at 5 p.m., the wife returned home to discover that her son had disappeared. She asked her husband as to where their small infant son was, and the husband, who had been consuming drugs all day, acted very evasively, saying that he did not know. The wife became suspicious and she alerted the police. It was not until 2 days later the missing boy's grandmother smelled a foul odour emanating from the bathroom. She went into that small bathroom to find the source of the smell, and to her horror, she discovered the child's dead body on a bathroom shelf. The grandmother called the police immediately. The husband was arrested later that day, and after police conducted an investigation, they found that he had murdered the child by strangulation. And when he was asked why he had done it, he said he was angry that his son was bothering him while he was trying to take drugs. The father has now been sentenced to 30 years in prison. Now for a couple of updates. You may remember the story from a few weeks ago when a man killed another motorist with his Lamborghini due to him driving recklessly. It was, in fact, on February the 23rd of this year, in the early hours of the morning, that a Chinese national drove his very expensive Lamborghini along the boulevard of the Russian Federation at high speed. Now, not only was he driving recklessly, but also, when arrested, he was discovered to be intoxicated. When driving at speed, he had lost control of his vehicle and smashed into a Cambodian man driving his motto. The collision itself was so strong, it killed him instantly. But what happened next outraged many, as the two occupants of the Lamborghini then called an accomplice to come and collect them in a BMW, and they then fled the scene. But they did not get far, and both were arrested. The legal system in this case has acted swiftly, and this week the driver was sentenced to 2 years in jail. But although he was sentenced to prison for 2 years, he is to be held in jail for only 6 months. The remaining of his sentence will be suspended. This is in fact normal practice for negligent drivers under Article 85 of the Road Traffic Law. It may seem not to some that this penalty is not severe enough for such a crime, but the apprehension was swift, as was the judgment of the judge. Our second update this week. Do you recall last week the tale of this man? He was a brigadier general who has now been remanded in custody on drugs and firearm charges. His case created such media attention, he was dismissed from his post this week by the Deputy Prime Minister himself. Police had arrested the Brigadier General after an incident that occurred in the capital at 3 o'clock in the morning. A spokesman of the Phnom Penh Municipal Court stated, "The investigating judge has decided to detain the military officer, and he is to stand trial for not only the possession of a weapon without permission, but also the use of drugs." Now, what this guy did was incredible. He had got into a heated argument with his neighbour, and when the argument flared up further, he went into his house and retrieved the handgun. He then started firing wildly, threatening his neighbour. And there was no defence of self-defence, as now CCTV camera images show very clearly he did not fire in self-defence, but fired freely and wildly. To make this even worse, he was later discovered to have drugs in his system. The Deputy Prime Minister has removed him from the armed forces, and his future now looks very bleak indeed. Now I'm going to tell you something. This is, without doubt, the most horrific story I have ever read, and I have read hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of them. So here goes. I usually like to finish on a lighter note to our weekly broadcast, but this week, the final story is exceedingly dark. And believe me when I say, exceedingly dark. Firstly, let me show you some of the criminals involved. Just a bunch of lads, you may think. They could be from any town or any far-flung village. But when I tell you what they are charged with, it will shock you. The 6 in the photo were arrested for the gang rape of a minor. And it's not just these 6 that are alleged to have raped the young girl, as a further 8 boys are wanted for questioning. The police report said that a group of 14 teenage boys persuaded a 15-year-old girl to go with them to enjoy the Khmer New Year celebrations. They travelled around, visiting various sites within Siem Reap province. It was then, though, that the pleasant day out turned into one of utter horror. The boys took the girl to the home of a boy named Neth in Wat Bo village later that evening. And it was there the boys repeatedly raped her throughout the evening. But her nightmare was far from over, as they kept her overnight, and the next day the boys took that girl to the home of another boy, and yet again they repeatedly raped her. Now that is horrifying enough, surely, but it was still not over for this young girl, as incredibly yet again she was taken to a third boys' home in Banteay Sray district, and yet again she was abused in the most foul manner. Only after an ordeal that went on for 3 long days, the girl was dumped at her family home, distraught and utterly humiliated. The level of depravity displayed in this case is simply off the scale. And now these young boys will have to answer to a judge for their utterly barbaric behaviour. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week.
It's what everyone's talking about. Oh, look, it's raining. You're like, I don't know, snow has fallen on Angkor Wat. No, it really has made a great impression after all the heat. But the heat is not over, not by a long way. It's still real humid. Humidity can rise easily to 56%, but there is rain on the way, and there is a lot of rain underway. And what I'm relying on there is my own information, because I travel to Thailand very regularly filming temples. And I went into Thailand, and holy cow, I was hit by some storms. So it's only a matter of time before those storms wander this way.
This has been the Khmer Times News. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next weekend for your weekly roundup.